Hello and welcome to Americans Learn. My name is Lauren, and today I am going to be learning about the difference between American and European suburbs and why US suburbs suck. I grew up in an American suburb. It was fine. You had to drive everywhere. That was unfortunate. And the suburb I grew up in was actually kind of fun because it was pretty much equidistant from almost anything you might want to do. There was, there was woods close to me. So if I wanted to go hiking and go to the reservoir or any other thing like that, I could actually do a really cool hike. We had a mountain range kind of close because I lived in Maryland, so it's we would be able to go an hour and we could go skiing or up to the Appalachian Trail or something, and then another hour in your own Ocean City, and so you can go to the beach. And it was just kind of fun to have lots of different options. So I will say that was one thing about living in an American suburb. I had a lot of options for random outdoor activities to do, not a ton of options for not outdoor activities, a lot of chain restaurants, chain shops. So living in a city now, I much appreciate being able to, support small businesses a lot more often. But I'm curious to see how they are different than European suburbs and why US suburbs are worse. I'm probably not going to disagree with it, honestly. But I'm curious to find out what's going on. So make sure you comment, subscribe. If you live in an American suburb or if you live in a European suburb, let me know which you think is better, especially if you've lived in both. I think that would be interesting. So let us go. We're going to see the difference between an American suburb and a European suburb and why the US ones are worse.
This is a typical American suburban street.
Yes, it's
It's wide, the houses are very far apart and look mostly the same.
Yeah, because they do look mostly the same, but the big yards is always a good plus. I always liked having a big yard. It was a big-ish yard. We had fences everywhere where I grew up because everyone around me had a dog. But still nice to have a big open space to play backyard games in.
There is barely anything on the well-manicured lawns. Post boxes, a few trees or bushes, and the occasional fire hydrant.
That's a weird
Now
mailbox.
compare this to a suburb in Leipzig, Germany. What differences do you notice?
It looks more like the city street where I live.
First off, there is stuff around you. The streetscape is very diverse and mentally engaging. In comparison, the American suburb looks like a desolate urban wasteland. Also, in the European suburb, the street is narrow, there is a 30 km/h speed limit, and the buildings are close together. Do notice the tram tracks. In this suburb, you can live car-free. If you want to go to the center, you can either take the tram or ride your bike for 20 minutes on dedicated bike lanes.
That's cool.
Or take the S-Bahn because there's also a train station. In the American suburb, you have no option but to drive. Head out onto the busiest road, a horrifying mix of street and road, onto the jammed highway, and after an hour you'll be in the center, searching for a parking spot.
I've literally never heard the term strode before. But yes, this does look like every suburb in America. It is kind of a wasteland once you get out of where the houses are. And honestly, I don't find the houses to be a problem, like the big yards. And like I said, I kind of like that. It is kind of weird, I will say, sometimes where it's just super cookie cutter. It gets kind of Stepford. But this part, I don't like. I don't like that you have to drive everywhere. And I don't like that it's just kind of ugly and it's all so industrial, so fast, to get anywhere. And then none of that's great. But I like the big yards. And I will say the Leipzig suburb that he showed kind of looks like the suburb. I live technically within city limits in Chicago. It looks like my street. like fun houses, different weird architecture. It looks like nobody consulted anybody when it came to the design of the houses they were going to make. And there's a train station and lots of public transportation. It's very easy to live car free. So apparently my city area is very similar to a European suburb. It's kind of fun.
How about going to a restaurant? In the European suburb, there are dozens of different, unique, local restaurants reachable on foot, by bike, or public transit. In the American suburb, you're an hour walk away from a chain restaurant next to a busy road. If you want to eat, you gotta get in your car.
Yep. That's true.
What if you have children? In this European suburb, there are 3 schools close by. Kids can walk or bike there on their own and learn to be independent early on. In the American suburb, a child could get to school after 35 minutes of walking, mostly along a busy arterial road, also having to cross a 6-lane road. And somehow, there's no crosswalk, so kids...
Keep saying strode. I've never heard the term strode. And also, I think that super depends on where you live in America. Like where I grew up, my elementary school was half a mile away. It was like right up the street from my house. I didn't even have to. The only street I crossed was the street to get to the school. Like there was one little road, one crosswalk. And then I was there. It took no time. It just went straight up the hill and it was totally fine. And like my high school was like 2 miles away. And like that. But, and again, if you went the long way, if you went the 2 miles away, then it was able to go on like regular roads. If you tried to go the quicker way, it was a very busy road and it was not safe. But like, it was like all of the schools that I went to were walkable. And like all of those schools also had other schools that weren't too far away, also pretty walkable. Not for a 7-year-old or something, but for an adult, sure. It's like, and like with the high schools, it's like, yeah, you could absolutely walk. So I think that depends on the suburb that you grew up in. Not all of them that's super far away.
Kids have to be driven to school every day by mommy and daddy.
I had a bus in high school.
The same goes for sports. Over here, kids can take a 10-minute walk to the nearest sports field or a 3-minute bike ride on calm, safe streets on their own. In the US, it's a 40-minute march through a maze of streets partially along a major transit artery. Gotta get in the SUV and let mommy drive you to practice. This is where the term soccer mom originates from, by the way.
Oh.
People lament today's children for being overly dependent on their parents. But in such neighborhoods, children don't have a choice but to be dependent. Otherwise, they cannot go anywhere. They are stuck at home.
That is true. Like, at least for all the sports fields that we usually went to, you did kind of have to drive to get to those, and it wasn't safe to walk. That was true especially because not all of the like rec league sports were like done out of the schools. Because if they were done out of the schools, then it was kind of fine. But if not, then yeah. Also, in my neighborhood, I didn't necessarily want to walk all those places, even if it was technically possible, because there was so many hills. It was just like, it was exhausting. You have to go on like an angle like this. It was like, ugh, I don't feel like doing that every day. That's just me being lazy, though.
In contrast, in European suburbs, kids can be let out safely to move around on their own, to go to places they want to, without the need for the mommy and daddy taxi service. Do note that yellow residential building on the left. That is a mid-rise. European suburbs tend to be a mixture of those and single or multi-family homes, like on this street.
Cool.
Zoning in US suburbs only allows for single-family homes, and they are usually placed very far apart, leading to low density and long distances. This makes public transportation non-viable. Over here in Europe, hundreds of people live within walking distance of this tram stop. In the US, if you put a tram stop here, you'd have a few dozen people living within walking distance.
That is
Meaning,
true.
even if you built public transit here, almost nobody would take it, because no matter how you build it, people would be too far away from it. If you're half an hour away on foot from the nearest tram stop, you'll take your car instead, and people do. So giant highways had to be built, rammed right into the city, usually demolishing non-white neighborhoods in the process. The end result was mass motorization all across America, constant traffic jams, noise and pollution, but not for the suburbanites. It was the urban dwellers, particularly those who were poor, who had to live near high traffic areas in cheap, low-quality housing. The suburbs also became a growth Ponzi scheme, where income from the suburbs couldn't cover future infrastructure overhauls, so the city had to expand and sell new properties constantly to get enough money to maintain what they already have.
And like now all the suburbs, like the people, and this is something that I've noticed since I do live now in a city. It's like all the suburb people come to the city and work in the city, and then they go back to the suburbs, and like so their taxes aren't helping to pay for what city taxes need to pay for, but guess what? They're using all of the amenities all the time. Come on. That annoys me. And he is correct that, like, yeah, the way that the suburbs sprawl and, like, the way that it does force people to need to to use like the highways, that does disproportionately affect poor people and people of color, and that is a huge issue.
Not Just Bikes did a great video about this, link in the description. The suburbs and car-centric development were useful political tools in the 1950s to enforce a Christian conservative, white nationalist hierarchy within American society, where white men are on top, women are at home, fully dependent on their husbands, and where all resources are channeled towards the white middle and upper class in the form of billions in state subsidies. And the rest of society, poor people, non-whites, were left to fend for themselves in decaying urban centers, sucked dry financially by the parasitic suburbs around them. Car-centric planning became a weapon of choice for conservatives in order to maintain the unequal status quo. And this phenomenon isn't unique to America. In Europe, as our cities transition away from cars, the opponents of this change are almost always conservatives. While the incumbent Paris mayor campaigned on eliminating 50,000 parking spaces, her conservative opponent, who looks frankly diabolical even by French standards, wanted to halt decongestion measures. In Prague, a city overrun by cars, conservatives keep screaming about the—
those two reminded me of the Dark Kermit meme, honestly. Like, they looked the same. When you go back to that picture.
Conservatives keep screaming about—
No, I'm going to go back to the picture. There's the picture. Like, yeah. So, honestly, it really just looks like the Dark Kermit meme. It's like, oh no, she wore lipstick and got her hair cut in a can I speak to your manager hairstyle. Like, that's weird. They look eerily, at least the pictures that they've chosen here, they look eerily similar.
Looks frankly diabolical even by French standards, wanted to halt decongestion measures. In Prague, a city overrun by cars, conservatives keep screaming about the cyclo-fascists ruining the city after a shadow is painted somewhere. Meanwhile, conservative district mayors are busy turning sidewalks into parking lots. In Madrid, the conservative city leadership cancelled the ultra-low emission zones, leading to local protests to bring them back. In Budapest, we have Orbán's far-right conservatives screaming about how there is a witch hunt against drivers by the new center-left mayor, and complaining how in inner-city Budapest it's almost faster to walk now than to drive. Even in Germany, Bavarian conservatives are dumping money into highways while letting the rail network fall into disrepair. As a rule of thumb, in every city with decongestion measures, you'll also find conservatives screaming about the war on cars, the symbol of hierarchy in transportation, where the affluent suburban minority gets to occupy 80% of public space inside cities, compared to the more egalitarian space use of public transit and bicycles. God forbid you have to get out of your giant SUV of death and get on a tram with the peasants. Of course, upholding the conservative hierarchy isn't why suburbs are built today in the US. It's mostly just a necessary continuation of the Ponzi scheme that began with the first suburbs. Also, it's due to faulty zoning codes not allowing for mid-rise developments that would actually make more money for the city, increase density, and make public transit viable. In Europe,
so okay, was that would have been Chicago? I don't know if Menards is like just a Midwest thing though. It might be everywhere in the Midwest. That's just kind of funny. I was like, Lawndale.
Our suburbs are mixed, with both mid-rises, single and multi-family homes. They're an organic part of the city and contribute fairly to the local budget. There is also subsidized, affordable public transit. All in all, it's more egalitarian. And if the US situation sounds depressing in contrast, as an American, there are things you can do to potentially help change things. If there is a local transit riders union, go join it. Look if there are any initiatives on the ballot for traffic calming, bike lanes, etc. Show up to your local town hall meetings and advocate for zoning reform, ending parking minimums, and so on. If you're persistent enough, your ideas will be heard, and you can help push America back towards sensible, fair, more egalitarian urban planning, one neighborhood at a time. That's what I would do if I were you. Thank you for watching. Oh, and by the way, there is now a new membership option for my channel, so if you wish to support me making content like this, please consider becoming a member by pressing the join button next to the subscribe button. And I'll be seeing you next time.
Okay, fantastic. So that was a little bit of a rundown between American and European suburbs and why US suburbs suck. I'm not fully, a lot of what he said, I believe, is actually very, very valid. Most of what he said is. I don't agree that all of it is terrible. For instance, like I said, I don't mind the bigger yards that are afforded in, like, by having like extra space in the suburbs, but as I grew up in a place where it was nice to be able to just, a bunch of neighborhood kids could run to somebody's backyard and like we would just spend the day between three houses like with making a huge soccer game or something, because the backyards kind of all ran into each other. And again, except for in my backyard, because my backyard was surrounded by fences and dogs, which was fine. I liked that. I got to see a lot of dogs. But it's like my across the street neighbor, it was like the three houses that were like right next to each other there, all of their backyards were open. And so like we would just have these huge neighborhood games back there, and that was a lot of fun. So it's like he's talking about how kids can't do anything in the suburbs. That's not entirely true. And I do think that very much depends on where you are. Almost everybody I knew as a kid, and this might make me sound so privileged, most people had a basketball like net in their driveway. You know, it's like there's always something, like you can find stuff to do. And like I said, I grew up and there was like woods near my house. We could go hiking in that. In general, I do like living where I live now. The area where I'm at it still feels kind of suburby, but maybe that's because it feels like a European suburb, based on everything that he showed me in this video. I was like, oh yeah, the houses are close together. The architecture's kind of cool. There's a lot of public transportation, very, very close. The streets are kind of narrow. A lot of one-way streets around the area where I live. It's I don't know, like there's fun, there's beautiful foliage, lots of trees. It's a really, really cool neighborhood where I live. Lots of really cool like little shops and small businesses, mom and pop restaurants. I appreciate living close to all of that because yeah, having to drive everywhere in the suburbs sucks, and it's really bad for a carbon footprint. It's bad for the environment, it's bad for the planet. All of that is very, very true. And of course what he was talking about, how the suburbs really kind of got started and how it started out as a very white conservative movement and kind of with like pretty racist undertones and overtones, and just tones. That's all true also, which is, hey, fun. We got a little bit of a history lesson in here too. I wasn't expecting that. I was just really just expecting someone to be sassy about American suburbs, which he was, and that's fair because most of what he said is actually very, very true. And it is kind of fun because like I said, I grew up like now that I'm staying here, it's like I'm like, oh, 2 mile walk, that's nothing. When I was a kid, like trying to like go anywhere, I was like, ugh, like a mile away. That's so far. Because again, the roads, he's right, the roads aren't necessarily super safe to actually get somewhere. To get to another house, it's fine. You can stay on residential areas, but like to try and get to the mall or a restaurant, the movies, like anywhere like that, you definitely have to drive. And yeah, that's no good. So anyway, that was American suburbs versus European suburbs. Which one do you think is better? Where do you live? Do you have a European suburb that you like particularly well, or do you have an American suburb that you think that like defies the odds? Let me know, and join the chat. Let's see what's going on. I'm curious to see what other people have to think about this. I wasn't expecting it to get a little bit political, but it did. Not a problem. That's fine. Always an interesting discourse there. So thanks again for joining me, and I will see you all next time on Americans Learn. Bye-bye.